The story opens with a beautifully adorned white casket resting in the center of a vast, empty room. Adorned with an intricate golden cross on its lid and gilded accents along its edges, the casket begins to slowly creak open. Thick smoke pours out, swirling and filling the room. From within the dissipating haze, a shadowy figure takes shape. As the smoke clears and silence returns, a young man emerges, elegantly dressed, standing in the center of the room. He wears a black suit paired with a golden waistcoat and a pristine white shirt, complete with a lace jabot cravat and cuffs. His jet black hair contrasts sharply with his attire, and when he opens his eyes, they reveal a vivid crimson hue. He surveys the room with a calm yet piercing gaze, absorbing his surroundings. He notices that the door is locked, so he turns his attention to the curtained window. He lifts his hand, and the curtains part, quickly followed by the window opening. The young man is puzzled by the cityscape he sees outside. He looks out and then slowly steps onto the balcony, his jacket fluttering in the wind. He stands above a busy street in South Korea and looks down at the people below. Positioned high up in an abandoned building, he squints to get a clearer view of the crowd. He observes several students in school uniforms, heading to their classes. Stepping back, he raises his arms. His clothes begin to dissolve and transform into the same uniforms worn by the students below. It's a typical workday. The streets are bustling with people heading to work or school. A young man walks along, following the path his mind dictates, and he quickly grabs everyone's attention. Some schoolgirls blush at the sight of him, while others stare in shock, amazed by his posh appearance and handsome looks. Ignoring the attention, the man stops at the crosswalk, waiting for the green light. When the green light flashes, he doesn't immediately understand its meaning, so he stands still. Observing others beginning to cross, he realizes that the green light signals it's safe to proceed. He then steps out and crosses the road gently. After walking for a while, he notices a lot of students running past him, clearly late for school. He stands there, puzzled by their urgency. Suddenly, a red-haired boy behind him says he shouldn't be so relaxed because Pedro is on duty. The man turns around to face the boy, who gets scared when they make eye contact. The boy checks the time, realizes he's late, and rushes off to school, yelling at the man to hurry up or risk being late himself. As the boy runs, he thinks about the man's appearance, convinced that someone so handsome would definitely be well known at school. The boy picks up his pace again while the man follows slowly. The man stops by the school gate and hears someone speaking in a serious tone, scolding a student for being late. As he gets closer, he hears a voice filled with anger saying that he can't go easy on his class. Looking through the bars, he sees a man boiling with rage and radiating a powerful aura. In the school courtyard, a towering stone bears the famous words of William Ernest Henley, "I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul." The man, standing amidst his students, commands their attention. With a firm grip on a stick, he paces back and forth, casting an imposing shadow over the kneeling figures. Suddenly, he halts before Shinwoo, the red-haired boy we've seen before, and the man delivers a sharp blow to his head with the stick, reprimanding him for his tardiness once more. The other students couldn't help but giggle as Shinwoo blushed with embarrassment. He glanced around and noticed even Yuna, whom he secretly admired, giggling along with the others, which made his situation even worse. Just then, Pedro, their teacher, intervened, ordering everyone to do 5 laps around the sports ground. Predictably, the students started to grumble and complain. In that moment, Pedro caught sight of Yuna silently pleading with him to lessen the punishment, and he also noticed Shinwoo looking at Yuna with concern. A mischievous grin crossed Pedro's face as he came up with a new proposal. He suggested to the students that if Shinwoo agreed to run 7 laps instead, everyone else would only have to run 3 laps. Shinwoo was taken aback, feeling a rush of panic, but he saw his classmates staring at him with pleading eyes, urging him to take one for the team. Catching Yuna's gaze again, he composed himself and calmly declared that he would run the 7 laps. His friends immediately surrounded him, expressing their gratitude and admiration. Shinwoo's spirits lifted as he saw Yuna smiling warmly at him. After the other students finished their laps, Shinwoo was still running, visibly exhausted and groaning with each step. Mr. Park instructed the rest of the class to head to their classrooms promptly. As he turned sharply, he noticed another student standing confidently at the gate. A brief, awkward silence ensued as they locked eyes. Finally, breaking the silence, the teacher inquired if the new arrival had just arrived. Mr. Park, known as Pedro to his students, was taken aback when another student arrived late to school. He studied the young man carefully, certain he hadn't encountered him at the school before. Shinwoo, having just completed his morning laps, approached them, equally surprised by the new arrival. "Do you know him?" Mr. Park asked Shinwoo, who shook his head. I just met him on my way here. Turning to the student, Mr. Park inquired about his identity, but the student merely nodded in response. They asked him where he was from, but couldn't understand his language. Mr. Park simply said he came from a distant place. As they continued to ask questions, the student responded with nods. Eventually, they concluded he was an international transfer student. Mr. Park and Shinwoo then turned around, with Mr. Park assigning Shinwoo the task of taking him to the principal. Shinwoo protested that he couldn't be tasked with escorting the new student to the principal's office, but Mr. Park ignored him and walked away. He then motioned for the young man to follow him as they made their way to the headmaster's office. Inside, the principal, a striking man with long, wavy blonde hair, was enjoying a cup of tea while perusing the newspaper. Spotting Shinwoo, he jokingly asked if Shinwoo had managed to find trouble again. Shinwoo quickly informed him about the new student, but the principal seemed unaware of any transfers scheduled for that day. He urged Shinwoo to hurry back to class before it was too late. Shinwoo instructed the young man to enter the office and departed. As the young man entered, the principal was taken aback by his presence. It turned out they knew each other, and the young man greeted him warmly, calling him by the name Frankenstein, revealing a long-standing connection between them. Frankenstein knelt before the student he recognized as his master. The student gently commanded him to rise, and the principal inquired about his master's well-being. It was then disclosed that his master had been asleep for 820 years, completely unaware of the modern world. As Frankenstein poured tea for his master, he pondered deeply. The master reassured Frankenstein that his abilities were sufficient, and that he would soon adapt to the new world. He praised the gate guard for his diligence and then inquired if Frankenstein had assumed leadership of the clan during his absence. Frankenstein clarified that they were currently at a school and proceeded to explain what a school entailed. He assured the master that he would do everything possible to help him adjust to the modern era. On the young man's first day of school, the classroom buzzed with curiosity as he was introduced. Mr. Park, familiar with such reactions, reflected on the principal's speech that had similarly captivated the students earlier. With a flourish, Mr. Park announced the arrival of a new transfer student, urging everyone to help him adjust to Korean customs, as per the principal's request. The students, especially the girls, were struck by the foreign student's handsome appearance and elegant demeanor. During introductions, Mr. Park realized he didn't yet know the new student's name. To everyone's surprise, the elegant young man spoke up in Korean, introducing himself as Kati Zatrama Dai Razel for the first time. The name drew astonished looks, but Shinwoo pointed out that Razel could indeed speak Korean, albeit claiming not to be fluent, despite speaking with ease. Mr. Park, grappling with the long name, asked Razel what they should call him. Razel simply replied that they could call him anything they liked. Shinwoo's casual demeanor towards Razel as an equal irritated Mr. Park, who was taken aback by the disregard for formalities. Mr. Park noticed that Razel seemed rude, and as he pondered this, Shinwoo stood up and suggested that Razel might not be familiar with Korean culture and might have made an innocent mistake. However, in an unexpected turn, Shinwoo then asked Mr. Park in a serious tone to put Razel in a headlock for 5 seconds as a punishment. Mr. Park refused, offering instead to do it to Shinwoo, which left Shinwoo feeling embarrassed as he sat back down. Mr. Park advised Razel on the importance of respecting elders. Razel, being over 820 years old, exchanged a knowing look with Mr. Park. Following Mr. Park's suggestion, Razel was directed to sit next to Shinwoo. When the next class began, the English teacher noticed Razel and Shinwoo sharing a desk and asked Shinwoo why. Shinwoo explained that Razel didn't have a book. The teacher then inquired about another group of 3 students with joined desks, and Shinwoo clarified that he also forgot his book that day. In the classroom, Shinwoo stirred from his midday nap, his thoughts drifting to Razel's peculiar behavior. Razel always appeared upright and attentive, rarely diverting his gaze except to glance at what Ikhan was typing on his computer. Shinwoo couldn't help but notice Ikhan's impressive computer skills, which seemed to fascinate Razel, contrasting sharply with his own unfamiliarity with modern technology. Reflecting further, Shinwoo observed that Razel exuded a formidable aura, making it intimidating for others to approach him, despite their curiosity and desire to connect. Shinwoo regretted choosing to sit next to Razel, who was incredibly handsome. The other girls in class shot jealous glares at Razel, which made Shinwoo uncomfortable. His crush seemed to be captivated by Razel's charm too. Overwhelmed by these feelings, Shinwoo buried his head on the table and started crying quietly. Meanwhile, the teacher noticed Shinwoo's distress while writing on the board. Although the teacher suspected it was because of Shinwoo, they decided to let it slide, considering it was the beginning of the week, and there was a new student in class. On the other hand, Frankenstein was in an abandoned building examining the coffin. He was trying to figure out how and why his master's coffin had ended up in such a place. In the principal's office, Razel sat quietly sipping his tea while the principal briefed him on the investigation. It turned out the building where Razel had awoken was newly constructed and recently taken over by an unidentified entity. The owner was nowhere to be found, suggesting a deliberate attempt to remain anonymous. What caught the principal's attention most was the presence of the coffin where Razel had been resting. No one could have known he was inside. The principal emphasized the seriousness of the situation, hinting that someone involved might pose a threat. Razel remarked on how much things had changed, noting how humans had grown stronger and more secretive over time. Once the weakest among supernatural forces, humans now rivaled other powerful factions, their adaptability allowing them to flourish in unexpected ways. They had integrated deeply into human society, their influence and capabilities expanding rapidly. The principal admitted he was out of touch since Razel's disappearance, but now that Razel was awake, he pledged to gather more information and unravel the mystery. Meanwhile, Frankenstein, observing quietly, couldn't help but smile to himself. Despite everything, Razel seemed unchanged, maintaining his aloof demeanor as if nothing fazed him. Changing the topic, Frankenstein inquired about Razel's experience in the class. Razel responded that it had been an interesting experience so far, and he was relieved that it wasn't too bad. As he placed his teacup on the table, he also mentioned that he was facing some challenges with his abilities. This revelation hit Frankenstein suddenly, like a bolt of lightning. He realized that Razel's telepathic ability might have been affected. Frankenstein asked if this was due to Razel sleeping for too long. However, Razel clarified that it was actually because of a subject called mathematics taught by the gatekeeper. Frankenstein felt relieved that Razel's abilities were not permanently affected, but he worried about how to explain this situation to his master.